In this movie, we will use our address label maker program one more time to discuss two of the properties associated with the entire form. Instead of each individual control, these two properties I'm going to mention are associated with the entire form. First, we will look at the start position property, making sure that you have the form itself as the focus, and you can tell this by looking at the top of the properties window, and it should say Form 1, unless of course you've renamed the form, which we will discuss later. In the Form 1 properties, that is the start position property, and clicking the drop down arrow, you will see that there are 5 different settings that you have to choose from. The 5 settings are manual, center screen, Windows default location, Windows default bounds, and center parent. We will explore 4 of these since the center parent is dependent upon having multiple forms, which will be discussed later. When you choose manual as the start position, you are asking Windows to allow you or the user to adjust the start position of the form at runtime in this manner. So when I run the project, by default it starts in the upper left corner of the screen, and then I can simply manually readjust it or move it around however I would like to. You can also allow the user to adjust the height and width and the overall size of the form itself by using the sizing handles and so forth. Returning to the start position property for the form, the center screen start position setting, when executed, will just as you might expect, will put the form in the middle of the screen. Again, to demonstrate, when I run it, as you can see, the form is in the middle of the screen. The user is still free to move the form around, so if you want your form to always start in the middle of the screen, you would choose center screen as the form start position setting. Looking at the next start position, which is Windows default location, when we execute, the Windows default location is wherever the Windows default location is for your computer. Now this could vary slightly, particularly when you change resolution of your monitor, but this will go to a specified location that is known as the Windows default location. Returning one more time to the start position property, and this time we will select the Windows default bounds. Now when I execute this form, the start position as Windows default bounds, you'll notice that the form has now changed size. There is a default size that is associated within the Visual Studio environment that will assume that your form should take on this size unless you otherwise specify. So typically you would use one of the following properties for your Windows startup position. You typically use manual, center screen, or Windows default location. As I mentioned earlier, center parent will be used when you have multiple forms. Now there is one other property that we want to take a look at, and that is the WindowState property, which is located all the way at the bottom of the alphabetical properties list. By default, the WindowState property is normal, and that's what you've been seeing in all these demonstrations. If, on the other hand, you would like for the window upon startup to become minimized, that is, to be put down in the system tray, but it'd be minimized but available, you could choose minimized. If you select maximized, then when you run the program, just as you might expect, the window would be automatically maximized as if the user had clicked the maximize button. So I'll choose maximized and run the project. And as you can see, the form is taking up the entire window, that is, it is being maximized. Of course, the user could choose the restore button, which would then restore it down to its default size.